Imagine you wake up and you don't own your day. Not in the vague modern sense of a bad morning. Literally, the ship you're on belongs to the British Royal Navy, and by law, so do you. You were pressed into service, which is a polite phrase for kidnapped off a dock at night and told you were now a sailor. You haven't been paid in 4 months. The food is rotten. The man above you can have you flogged for looking at him wrong, and if you try to leave, they'll hang you. This was the real life of most British sailors in the 1700s. And then one day, the ship gets raided by pirates. The pirates win. They look at you and offer you a choice. Join us, or stay. Thousands of men chose the pirates, not because they were reckless, because they'd done the math. Here's what people get wrong about pirates. We picture them as rebels, adventurers, men who chose danger because they loved it. That's the myth. The historical reality is more uncomfortable. Most pirates weren't drawn to the sea by a love of freedom. They were pushed there by the complete absence of it. The Royal Navy in the early 18th century operated on a system called impressment. Men were seized, legally, from ports, taverns, and streets, and forced into naval service. No contract, no guaranteed pay, no right to leave. Desertion was a capital offense. Insubordination was met with flogging, sometimes hundreds of lashes. Naval surgeons of the period documented men dying from punishment, not from battle. The merchant ships weren't much better. Sailors worked for wages that often never arrived, under captains who held absolute power over everything that happened on the water. There was no appeal, no oversight, no one you could tell. So when a pirate ship pulled alongside and the captain offered you a share of everything taken, a vote in how the ship was run, and the right to leave when you wanted, that wasn't a temptation. That was the first fair offer you'd ever received. But here's what almost nobody realizes about what they built instead. Before a pirate ship left port, every man on board signed a document. Historians call them Articles of Agreement. The pirates just called them the Articles. And they were, by any reasonable measure, the most equitable employment contracts written in the 18th century. They specified in writing exactly what each man would receive from every raid, not the captain's decision. Fixed ratios, agreed upon before anyone saw a single coin. The captain typically received 1.5 to 2 shares. Every crewman received 1. There were no exceptions and no hidden deductions. They specified compensation for injury. Lose a right arm, 600 pieces of 8. Left arm, 500. Right leg, 500. Left leg, 400. Eye or finger, 100. These weren't suggestions. They were binding obligations, documented and witnessed before the voyage began. The British Royal Navy at the same time offered its pressed sailors no contract, no guaranteed wage, and no compensation for wounds received in service to the crown. The pirates had better labor law than the government that was hunting them, and they put it in writing. The captain of a pirate ship was elected, not appointed by a king or a company, elected by the crew before each voyage, and removable by the same vote at any time. Captains who were cowardly, cruel, or incompetent were voted out. Some were marooned, some were simply demoted. The crew decided. The political theorist Peter Leeson spent years studying pirate governance and documented something that should have been impossible given the era. Pirate ships in the early 1700s, decades before the American or French revolutions, were operating as functional democracies. Majority vote on destinations, majority vote on targets, majority vote on what to do with prisoners. The captain had authority only in battle, when speed of decision mattered. Outside of combat, he was one vote among many. The British ships hunting pirates were run by absolute command. The pirate ships were run by consensus. One of those systems produced loyal crews who fought harder. The other produced desertion, mutiny, and men who jumped ship the moment they saw a black flag on the horizon. But the strangest part isn't the rules. It's who enforced them. Here's where it gets hard to explain away. The average active career of a Golden Age pirate lasted roughly 2 years. They knew this. It wasn't a secret kept from new recruits. The fate of captured pirates was public, deliberate, and designed to be seen. Executions were held at the waterfront. Bodies were left hanging in iron cages at harbor entrances as warnings. In 1722, the largest mass pirate trial in history ended with 54 men hanged in a single proceeding. The men who signed those articles knew exactly what they were signing toward: a short window of something that felt like freedom, followed almost certainly by a rope. And they chose it anyway. Not all of them were desperate. Historical records show that some pirates had alternatives: merchant positions, shore work, family. They chose the ship. Bartholomew Roberts, one of the most successful pirates in history, was a mate on a slave ship when his vessel was captured. He was offered freedom. He asked to join the pirates instead. Within months, he was their captain. He said, according to the account of a captured prisoner, that a merry life and a short one suited him better than a long life and a dull one. He was dead within 3 years. He died in battle, which was, by pirate standards, the good ending. There's a letter that survived from a pirate named John Archer, written the night before his execution in Boston in 1724. He wasn't asking for mercy. He'd stopped expecting that. He was trying to explain something. He wrote that he had no complaint against God or man for what was about to happen, that he had made his choice, knowing the cost, that the years on the water had been the only years of his life in which he had felt, as he put it, like a man and not a tool. Historians who study the golden age of piracy, roughly 1680 to 1730, find this theme in the documents again and again. Men who understood the arithmetic perfectly, who knew the odds, who chose the short equation over the long one because the long one didn't have anything in it worth counting. They weren't reckless. They were precise. They had looked at both options with clear eyes and decided that a life without dignity wasn't long enough to be worth preserving. That's not the story we tell about pirates, but it's the one they left behind. Here's what stayed with me after looking into all of this. The governments of the 18th century that hunted pirates described them as enemies of all mankind. That was the legal term. Hostis humani generis, enemies of the human race. It was the charge that justified hanging them without the usual protections of criminal trial in any port, under any flag. What those governments were actually saying, stripped of the legal language, was this: these men have built something we cannot allow people to see. A ship where the lowest man has a vote, where the injured are compensated, where the captain serves at the pleasure of the crew, where the rules are written down and apply to everyone. If that idea spread, if the sailors on naval vessels and merchant ships looked across the water and saw what was possible, the entire system that depended on their compliance would collapse. The pirates weren't hanged because they were violent. The seas were full of violence. Naval captains committed atrocities that were never prosecuted. The pirates were hanged because they were legible, because what they had built could be read, understood, and wanted. The threat wasn't the rating. It was the example. So go back to that moment on the deck. The pirate ship has pulled alongside. The offer is on the table. Join us or stay. The man who chooses the pirates isn't choosing death over life. He's choosing a life where the 2 years he has actually belonged to him over a life where the 40 years he might have belonged to someone else. He's done the math. Not quickly, carefully, over months or years of watching the captain's back, eating the rotten food, watching the pay that never came. He's choosing not because he doesn't understand the cost, but because he understands it better than anyone. History called them criminals. The law called them enemies of mankind. The men who hunted them wrote the definitions, so that's what stuck. But in the letters they left behind, in the articles they signed, in the votes they cast on ships that had no right to exist, they left a different record of people who looked at the world as it was, decided it was unacceptable, and built something else, imperfect, violent, short-lived, and entirely their own. They knew it would end. They went anyway.